Robin, how are you doing today?
Thank you. Fine. It was super fun to follow the last debate, and very interesting as well as a lead-up, I think, to our conversation. And yeah, I'm good. How are you, Pierre?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good as well. I don't know if we're gonna be able to have as explosive style or chat as the previous panel, but we'll have a little bit more of a cozy conversation, I think, here today.
Yes.
First of all, Robin, the topic of this fireside chat is gray markets, obviously, and how to navigate those gray markets, which is a hot potato within the industry at the moment. Now, I would like to just start by asking you. Obviously, Robin, you founded GIG. You led that company to great success. You built it in an incredible way, and since you left the company, you have been kind of under the radar for a while, but you have started a new venture now, which you call the Ichiban Ventures. And I would like to just ask you, how has it been the last couple of months? What have you been working on? What is the thought behind Ichiban? And please introduce your ideas behind your new venture in general, please.
Thank you, and for the good introduction. We put the shovel in the ground about February, and what we're aiming to do is to launch the best operator in the world in terms of casino. We have had an amazing time. It has been Corona, and everybody's been at home, but we managed to procure some 50 game providers, 30 payment providers. We've gotten a couple of licenses. We've gotten bank accounts together. We've hired some 18, 20 people, gotten the companies up and running and everything without leaving the house. So that's been a very interesting experience. And it's been very productive. I think one of the most productive periods I've ever had. And now we're close to launching, and it's super exciting.
Brilliant. So can I ask you? I mentioned your time at GIG, of course, which is where people know you from. But I would like to ask you now, when you start Ichiban, you're a new operator. What are you taking with you from your previous experience at GIG? What have you learned? And now, when you do a new restart, what will you do different?
Yeah. I think I was very fortunate to be in GIG because it was a fantastic university in terms of learning business and iGaming. We did it all. We did affiliate marketing, we did B2C operations, built our own platform, sports betting, trading tools, remote gaming server, we sold B2B, we did B2C and so forth. And of course, the company grew really rapidly, and we hit regulation as everybody else and had to learn from those downfalls as well. And when setting up a new company now, we have a chance to sort of accumulate all of that knowledge and experience and handpick the best people we know, and man the battle stations with incredible talent, automate the shit out of everything, and make sure we deliver the best possible product. So I'm just looking forward to being able to build a company ground up, deliver value to all, and do it as well as possible, with the mistakes having been done in the past and having learned from those.
Okay, so can you mention, like, what would you say would be a mistake that you would, let's say, that you would like to avoid that you perhaps did at GIG, or what would you say would be a success at GIG? Can you mention one each?
Yeah, let's start with, I think the days are over where it was build it and they will come, where you're growing volumes and scale and worrying about profits later on. You need to be profitable and grow rapidly from day one. It is a survival of the fittest, dog eat dog. And that's something we're very, very conscious about from the get-go, building a very lean cost model and a highly scalable organization and operation. And that's something I'm taking great pride in at the moment. When it comes to the success, I think what we did really well over at GIG was that we nurtured a fantastic culture, and we got some incredible talent together. And most importantly, we focused on the customers. And we tried to solve problems for the customers and build a really customer-oriented culture and sort of value proposition. And that, I think, is more important now than ever. And this is something I would definitely like to build on in Ichiban.
Fantastic, fantastic, Robin. So the topic today is obviously on the gray markets, and Ichiban is obviously, even the name is touching on your strategy here, which is kind of targeting Japan, I believe, as a primary market. You also mentioned that you will be targeting India as one of your other markets. Can you talk a little bit of why you are choosing those two markets specifically. Perhaps there's another market as well that I'm missing now, and what are the reason behind those markets specifically?
The future of online gambling is a regulated one, and eventually all markets will be regulated in one way or shape or form. And what we've seen is that in those markets where we've regulated already, there is a few teething problems, and the previous panel, I think, is a testament to that. And many operators are finding themselves in a regulatory and operational quagmire, sort of fighting with regulations in their home markets and margin pressure and operational headaches. And they're trying to sort of mitigate that and please shareholders with expanding into more emerging markets. And we've turned it upside down. We've said that, okay, let's sit in space and take a look at the world and identify those 20-25 markets that are attractive and that will regulate soon but haven't regulated yet, and try to achieve some scale and a position in those markets prior to them regulating, and then use that strong foothold and strategic position in those markets to be a market leader when they regulate, but also to expand into other markets that have already regulated. So we've turned it upside down, and we started targeting the most high potential markets we see around the globe today.
Okay, great. So when we look at, for example, Japan specifically, so you're sitting on the moon and you're identifying these markets that are you think are the most interesting ones. You identify Japan, okay, and you decide that now we're going to go into Japan and become successful there. Obviously, a lot of operators have tried and failed. Some of them have succeeded. What would you say when you look at a culture like Japan, where the people are different, how they are brought up are different, the games they play are different? What are the major challenges into actually succeeding in that market?
Look, it's not a new market per se, and as you mentioned, many operators have been there for years or tried for years, and I'm guilty of charge as well. When I was at GIG, we started targeting some of these markets, and I think the most important learning I've had, especially over the last months where we've approached this, is how respectful you need to treat the topic. And we've sort of started on a checklist to understand how complicated it actually is to launch successfully in the market. And I think most operators that are targeting these markets are underestimating it. They're going in too fast, and then sort of the local people that you're completely dependent on will quickly see through you. They will understand that you can't bring value, and they will probably not prioritize working with you. And sort of to go through that checklist in a bit of a prioritized order, we started looking at it simply from a sort of platform perspective, and the service to the player is, after all, the most important one, and to ensure that that sort of the games connect to a wallet where there's no lag and latency, that you can distribute your services, that the data that traverses up and down, the front and middleware, the back end, isn't too delayed. And if you look at various operators down there, there is very frequently 10, 12, 13-second load times on people that think they're optimized for the market, right? And they don't sit there, they don't play themselves, they don't realize how difficult it is. And then you need to continue looking at the infrastructure. Most games, for instance, in Japan isn't actually translated to Japanese. And let's reverse the spots and say that you yourself want to gamble for real money, and you speak English, right? And you go into a game where there is coin levels and where there is real money bets and where there is all sorts of rules, and you get the whole thing served with Japanese letters. Would you really be comfortable playing that game? So there is really bread and butter stuff out there that you need to handle from an infrastructure perspective. And then, since the markets aren't fully developed, you have payments, you have market access, traffic, and so forth that needs to be solved. And it all just takes a lot more time and effort and dedication and commitment and learning than what you originally thought. It isn't so that you can just take whatever website you have that was working even incredibly well in the Nordics or in the UK and just translate it to Japanese with an agency, get an agent or two going, and off you go. You need to commit way more than that. And you mentioned the culture. I was fortunate to speak with one of the people that has really succeeded in Japan and built up a major operation there, and that is widely respected and getting was getting some advice, and he mentioned the example of sort of walking into a Nike store in Tokyo and asking for a hoodie, and they didn't have his size, right? And in the Nordics, we might have been expecting the people to, list a different Nike store in the town and tell me where I could go and get one. But what they do there, they're world champions in customer support. What they did there was they actually called the other store, and a runner came with the actual hoodie, and they apologized greatly for not having it in store. And if you think about this level of customer service and you compare that to sort of what we're used to providing in the iGaming industry, then that's not a threshold. And given that most players are new, don't understand, the environment, has still yet to place their first online bet and create their first online account, would require a lot of support. I'm just touching briefly base on some of the many, many areas that you need to excel in, and it takes time and dedication to make it work.
Yeah, so that's an interesting example you mentioned on the level of customer support, for example. So when you build the CS department, for example, is that something then you have to pay very, very close attention to? Do you set up kind of different procedures? What do you do differently to succeed in that area, for example?
It was really interesting because you of course need local support, and for instance in Japan you need Japanese-speaking people. And I've asked this person, that has the operational responsibility for tier 1 operator, whether sort of 24/7 support was required, and sort of where I was heading was whether I can get away with chat support 9 to 5 their local time zone, and answer emails afterwards, and to save costs and so forth. But the way he perceived the question was revealed in his answer. He said, yeah, if you're really, really advanced on chatbots and AI, perhaps there is a way to make the service even better by providing immediate answers. So it wasn't even a discussion of whether you were going to provide 24/7 support, right? So I absolutely think this is a capability you need to build, and something, if you're going to be competitive, something you must have.
Katarina is commenting that she thinks the number one rule to better customer support is train the trainers. Particularly, is that something you would agree with as well?
No, absolutely.
That's something you can relate to.
Absolutely, and I also think empowerment, right? Gone are the days where a customer support agent was a ticket shuffler, dependent on experts around their organization. You need to empower them. They need to do KYC, they need to do payments, they need to do responsible gambling, they need to understand AML. You need super user agents, and that's how you provide a good service. Then they will be able to handle a ticket in one go.
Interesting. Okay, so let's jump into a more broader topic, which is if we jump out of Japan and we now go back to the moon here and look at the Earth again. When you sit down, Robin, now you're a launching operator, and you ask yourself these questions: what are these top 20 markets that you want to look towards? It seems that primarily you are looking at gray markets. Obviously, would you say, what is the difference for you when you look at gray markets compared to regulated markets? Is it just the fact that you want to specialize in a few gray markets and really, really want to be there and market leaders first, or is there any other reasons why you pick gray markets rather than primarily already regulated markets?
Look, when we're looking at the emerging markets, whether they're locally licensed or not, is not necessarily an issue. Now, sort of how we are evaluating it is we're looking at compound growth rates, digital penetration, market readiness, and gambling adoption, and these kind of things. Now, it tends to be that the more attractive markets have not yet reached regulation, albeit there is some that has. So when you're looking at these markets, I think what is important is that, again, you want to push the consumer friendliness, and you want to push innovation, right? You want to push better product, you want to push better features, better service. And what happens in many of these regulated markets is that you get stuck on features that are satisfying the framework, and that are not necessarily benefiting the consumer. I always brought up the example of how the source of wealth questionnaire contained, how much money you have gotten through your divorce proceedings, and how many people would actually divulge sort of that information to a casino they just started playing with, and it is not really about consumer friendliness. So in our case, we've identified some 8 markets that we're launching in over the coming months, and all of these markets have in common that they do not yet offer a locally licensed model for online. However, we're expecting them to do so within, a year to 5 to 10 years. And we need to grow a strong position and grow a strong unaided brand awareness in those markets, so that once they regulate, sort of that brand awareness can mitigate some of the taxation and threshold for regulation. So that's our model.
Great. And obviously, now, Robin, you are now becoming a startup again, with the limited resources in comparison to the major dragons out there, of course. Do you see that as a disadvantage or an advantage that you have towards the major operators? Because it's not the easiest climate at the moment to launch a new operator, of course.
No, but by looking at the evidence so far, and we're about to go live now, and we've seen that we've never been more productive. Even when we worked siloed in gig and had the startups within the bigger startup, we've never reached such a productivity that I'm seeing now. And there is just so many of the problems that are currently solved. There are so many people you can work with. There is providers of niche products, of larger products, and what I've seen is that the business, the industry wants new business, and mostly everyone wants to work with us and are giving really favorable terms. And it's frankly a fantastic environment to start in. And I don't see a big difference, in the challenges. These markets that we're targeting is more or less at the same maturity level that other markets was a few years ago. It is the same models, it's the same principles. It's just an even higher expectation of being competitive. So no, I think it looks fairly straightforward.
Okay, and how important would you say it is to have boots on the ground in these markets in general? Because you obviously have your friends that you can discuss to and kind of learn the market to some extent. But do you think it's important? Is it imperative to have boots on the ground when you launch in a strange gray market, would you say, like Japan or like India?
Look, so this winter I started sort of acquainting people through people I knew down in Asia, and I was fortunate to meet some of the people that have really had big success down there, and to start the conversation with them. And I think it is an absolute must to have those relationships, because the first thing I realized after a couple of months of traveling from and back and speaking with people was, hey, I need to take a step back. If I'm going to bring value to these people, if I'm going to, make their life better, then, I'm taking too lightly on this. I need to go even further and learn. Of course, with COVID-19, it wasn't too easy to travel there, so we pushed back some of the launches in Asia. But I think it is absolutely crucial. A lot of the work you need to do is trust-based. There is a very difficult international sort of frameworks and jurisdictions to relate to, and you need to develop a relationship with these people if they're going to trust you. I think you also need to develop a relationship if you're going to learn the ins and the outs. If people are going to willing to share that with you, you've got to give action to get action, right? And I guess what we can bring is we have a really good product knowledge. We have really good understanding of the sort of best practice that you should treat players with, and you should treat suppliers with, and you should treat affiliates with. And what they have is ins and outs for how to succeed in the marketplace. So marrying these two should be a very good proposition, I think.
Interesting. And can you give us as well just kind of an overview of your, let's say, your knowledge on the let's take the Japanese and the Indian market? Like, what would be your analysis of these two markets? What would you say are the keys to success, and in what ways are they different than the European market, for example?
So we've been fortunate, and people have shared data with us, large operators down there that are existing, and affiliates and so forth. And what you see is that, for instance, in Japan, it's a polarized marketplace between sort of an older generation used to live casino and very traditional Japanese sort of digital footprints, and the younger generation that are more into sort of the more modern games, you would assume, and are having a different expectation in terms of simplicity on the website and these things. So I think it is very important to understand that you're catering to both. Live casino having more than 50% share of wallet out there, it's very different than what we're used to in the Nordics. I think it is also important to understand the mentality. Japanese people are expected to perform. they are under massive pressure to learn. It is their obligation to learn, and hence they will read the terms and conditions, but they do also expect you to present all the information. So you'd see much more text, much more information in Japanese websites. They are used to a whole different set of colors and palettes and moods in order to be triggered and engaged. That needs to be covered. And I also think there is a story about the operator down there where a player had won a local jackpot of more than 300,000 euro. And they had unfortunately found that he deposited with a visa that wasn't his. And therefore they rolled back the gameplay and gave him the deposit back. And the person was obviously very unhappy. And then they went on to explain sort of the breach of terms and conditions that had happened. And the person went on to become apologetic and show me the player in the Nordics that because you have deposited somebody else's visa would apologize after you confiscate the 300k jackpot in a casino win. You know, it's a very different mentality, but that expectation is on you as well as an operator, and you can't mess that up.
Interesting. And if we move over to South America in general, also a market that is highly looked upon at the moment. What are your thoughts on South America? Is that also something that you will be looking into in your first round of markets that you are attacking? Is there any particular markets that you are interested in that continent?
I've traveled a fair bit to South America, and I live there. And
whereabouts did you live?
I lived in Venezuela, in Puerto La Cruz. I've also
Fantastic.
been traveling quite a bit to Brazil. Now, so I do have some views on the society there. And to be honest, I think you can't beat them all. You can't win every battle. And I think too many companies, in sort of a desperation after solving the problem with operational quagmire, has a too broad horizon. We have decided to not go for South America for the start, simply because we really want to add value to the markets we're going into. And what I see there, after having done the research, is the market is still not so large. Keep in mind, Japan, for instance, is if you include pachinko, it's about half of the total European gambling market size. You know, so that's a big target. Whilst in South America, still many countries are quite small, and there is also very complicated payment structures there, and general issues, I think, in getting the product out to people.
Do you have any? So you mentioned the Japanese market is including their local game is about half the size of the European market. Do you have an estimation in comparison to how much smaller the South American market is?
I couldn't say, because we only really have numbers from H2 Gambling Capital and so forth, and I'm not sure how much I can trust them. But whilst in Japan, sort of when you're looking at online casino, I would estimate the market somewhere 35 to 45 million NGR per month. Now that's numbers from operators that are 1, 2, and 3 there.
Okay, great. Okay, so we are flying all across the world here, Robin, today, which is interesting in the absence of travel in general. But there's another content that we haven't discussed yet, and I think that it's something that people are starting to look into now, which is Africa, actually. Do you have any thoughts that you would like to share on Africa and their future and what they could mean for the gaming industry?
So we've looked into it both in gig and have been invited to invest into various companies and people going down there, and I've looked at it, and for me it looks like an exciting market, but I think there's people that is much more competent than me to answer it, because I haven't really studied it in depth. And again, what sort of fended me off was that there is there is the sports pesos, there is the countries, where it's starting to become high NGR, but it's still very few markets, and you need to be a market leader, and in order to generate exciting volumes. So we have insofar not selected them, but of course South Africa is interesting, although it's a very grey status there, and if you can pull off mobile deposits then and betting, then a range of markets is interesting, but it really requires a local structure and local anchoring and people on the ground, and you really need to know what you're doing, and it's very different from what you're used to in Europe.
Yeah, I would imagine so. So the African market would be even more immature, so to say, a bit more difficult to even kind of get a footing into. As we've seen, for example, Betson now is entering the Kenyan market. We've also seen Betson acquiring a small operator in Brazil recently,
Yep.
as well, to kind of enter these type of markets. Do you think this is the right strategy to? Do you think it's possible to acquire your way into a market, so to say, by acquiring an operator? You now have that expertise in that market.
Look, I've done good acquisitions and I've done bad acquisitions, and the key to any acquisition is good integration, I suppose, and good strategic rationale. And I guess when it comes to sort of buying like the smaller operators in these markets, it's after all acqui-hires. You get people that have connections, that has know-how, that has relationships to players, to affiliates, and so forth. And these people gained it through entrepreneurship, and most likely they're not going to be your long-termist employee in the company. And okay, you can get a knowledge transfer, but if you sort of require to buy people in the first place to succeed in a market, you might ask yourself whether you have the skill set to nurture those competencies in the second round. So now, without touching on Betsson specifically, I would say that you should rather find structures where your company is able to support such entrepreneurs ground up, where you're able to gain those learnings, get competitive, learn things yourself, and grow organically. That would be my preferred route going forward.
Yeah, perhaps if you and then if you are a major organization who then acquires and integrates that team into their organization, it might be a completely different culture altogether, and
yes,
that might create issues too.
It's not easy.
Oh, I would imagine. Okay, we are running out of time, Robin. This is like always, it's super interesting to talk to you. Always a learning experience from my end, for sure. I'm sure for the people who are viewing too. If the viewers have any last questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. I can see that Varmo is having a question here. Varmo Habenen, he's asking, do you have any plans to offer sportsbook at some point, or will you be mainly focused on casino? And I would like to add to that question a little bit, which is, is this also something that is related to the markets you're going into? For example, India might be more sportsbook faced, and Japan might be more casino faced, for example. So yeah, feel free to answer that question.
Yeah, hi Vamo, how are you? It would be foolish, I think, to go to India long term without a cricket proposition at all, although gaming is quickly rising. And to answer your question, yes, we will have a sports betting offering, but again, we need to pick our battles, and this year for sure not, but next year certainly. And yeah, I think you need a sportsbook in most markets, actually, also the emerging ones. With that said, I think you need to clearly position them. Are you a casino? Are you a sportsbook? A multi-brand strategy is advised. Single sign-on and these things, probably the key to success. And this is how we're going to approach it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you so much for that. So before we close off for today here on the live stage, I wanted to mention that there's been 2 polls running. Will the UK Parliament's latest recommendation for a stricter gambling market push their operators to the black market? Interestingly enough, 64% thinks yes. Something to think about. And secondly, is Evolution Gaming overvaluing NetEnt? And 65% is voting no. Interesting again. And on that note, actually, you will see a little red marking here on the left side next to the sessions area, which is called now. This basically means that there is now a roundtable discussion that is active on just the topic of the Evolution Gaming's offer to purchase NetEnt. Is it overvalued? Is it not? So this is a discussion that any one of you guys who are listening right now can join. It's moderated by Sam Brown of Hero Gaming, and up to 8 people, I believe, can join this discussion. So this is happening now. So I urge you to jump over there, either to join that discussion or to listen in on the discussion as well. Super interesting. So that concludes the first power hour here of iGaming Next. Robin, I would like to thank you again for joining us today. I have just one last question to you, which is a short question. Can you mention one operator that is targeting grey markets that you look up to?
Coin Gaming.
Can you say that again?
Coin Gaming, sportsbet.io.
Coin Gaming. They are the ones to look out for.
Cool guys.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you, Robin. Thank you to all the panelists for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. Also, check out the networking session. That this is basically you can jump in there too to meet each other on a one-on-one video calls as well. But please do check out the sessions especially. Okay, thank you all so much, and have a great weekend, everybody. Take care, Robin, as well.
Thank you.
It's been fantastic. Bye.